Meeting Tuesday, May 28th, 2024. We're recording stuff. Roll call. Teresa?
Here we go. Chairman Jesse Koppel.
Here.
Ryan Green.
Here.
Ben Lee.
Here.
Steve Dyer. Kristen Hurst. Here.
And we will move on to Pledge of Allegiance. Everybody please stand and join me in Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 4 on our agenda, public comment for items not on the agenda.
I got one speaker slip, Walter Robb.
Good evening, Walter Robb, and a couple comments on Concord Crossing East from the approved section of things. And the emergency road, according to the requirements, could be up to 20 feet. So I'm curious in what the road actually might be. And also, did the city receive the funds to improve and extend Douglas? So those were a few items that were on the requirements that were dated February 28, 2023, and addressed to Sean and Donald Barnard, Mayor.
I can give you like a 60-second recap if you want. I don't want to take up too much of your time. It was a developers agreement, I believe, which is what Mr. Robb is referencing. In that developers agreement, there is a provision that in lieu of monies for an extension to be put on Douglas, they would submit a sum, I believe it's in the amount of 500 or some variation of, to the city of Johnstown for a future improvement that could allow for a connection point at some other place, or if another council decides, or whatever could happen in the future, some connection, Douglas. It's really for that future ability of a roadway, not knowing where it could be.
And that was the version that council approved?
That is the version, the developers agreement that council approved. So then secondarily, as far as the 20-foot, I would imagine that they're going to have to meet whatever provisions were agreed upon in the agreement, which if it's 20 feet, then the 20 feet is going to be the appropriate width for that particular emergency access.
So it does look a little wider, is that what you're saying?
No, it looks about 20 feet.
Oh, okay.
So, previous conversation, Sean indicated it might be 12, but according to the requirement, I've got it right here in front of me, and it's in the minutes and things as well, but it does say not to exceed 20 feet.
Okay.
And then it does say specifically, unless there's another agreement, but it says Slayball Builders will contribute $525,000 to the city for the purposes of extending and improving East Douglas Street.
So did we get those funds?
They're part of the agreement, so I believe there's a bond in place, but some of those funds have been worked through, and we're working with Mike and his team for some of the water line improvements. So there's been some variations to that, but yeah, overall, we're going to get the funds. If not, then there'll be a bond that's put in place, and we'll capture it from the bond through the insurance company.
Okay. So we don't have,
We don't have the funds yet, but like I said, there's a bond in place, and if they don't.
so there is a
provide the
bond in
funds,
place, okay.
If they don't, then we'll go ahead and.
Okay.
Or they can do a bond, or they can do a letter of credit. I believe the developer may have actually opted for the letter of credit. If they don't come through with their end, we pull it, and then we're able to get our funds. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
you bet.
Any other public comment items not on the agenda? Hearing none, we can move on to action on the minutes. Approval of minutes for April 23rd, April 30th, special meeting, and May 14th. We'll just do a group approval. And if we want to,
Were we all here for that?
The only person absent was Steve, so, perfect.
Well, there you go.
I'll move to approve as written in block.
I'll second.
Ben Lee.
Yes.
Kristen Hurst.
Yes.
Jesse Koppel.
yes.
Ryan Green.
Yes.
Item number 6, final plat, Concord Crossing East Phase 3, tabled May 14th. I will motion to take that off the table.
Second.
Are all in favor?
Aye.
If we would like, let's start with a little introduction from the applicant.
Hi, Mike Reeves with Kimley Horn, civil engineer for the project, 7965 North High Street, Columbus, Ohio. So we are here presenting the record plat for Phase 3, which is actually the fourth phase to be constructed. Because of our requirements with previous Ohio EPA and Army Corps of Engineers wetlands permitting, we had previously switched Phase 3 and 4 in the construction sequence. So this is the plat for Phase 3, but just wanted to make that clarification. So this plat is for the next section of construction, kind of just really to the north area of the existing clubhouse. There were some changes from the original preliminary plat, which we had discussed. I think Mr. Simonello had previously discussed with this, with the city, and Sean, I believe you were aware of it. But when this project was switched in ownership, the original preliminary plat had the areas between Mandrick Street and Bontrager Street, and then along Cannondale Avenue East as 65-foot wide lots. We reduced the number of total lots from the preliminary plat and made these 72-foot wide lots. So we made the lots bigger to accommodate the home styles for Schleybaugh Builders, who is ultimately the home builder for the site. And that's really the only change from the preliminary plat to the final plat.
Were all the lot sizes increased?
No, the ones on the ones on the west side of Mandrick, those were 70 originally, and they remain 70.
So it's
Lots
just the
70
ones-
to 77.
Just the ones here in the middle. 16 lots.
And 62 to 69 on the north side of Annandale.
Was that the only changes from the preliminary plat? Or was just those number of
Yeah, just
lots?
increasing the width of the lots.
All right, Sean, do you have any staff analysis that you want to provide on this application?
No, this one's pretty straightforward.
Is that the only change that you've seen?
Yeah, the
You
only,
reviewed it?
from the preliminary plat to the final, those are the only changes that we see from our end, so everything's consistent with the original design, except for the 70 foot, right?
72.
72, sorry, from the 65.
And so I see like those increasing the frontage, probably larger lot sizes is kind of what this board's been looking for, so.
I was not mad whenever the conversation
Yeah,
came up.
those are definitely what we were looking for as far as lot width. Questions that I had on this, obviously we have a drainage issue over there, more so now than I think we did at the beginning of this. What are we doing to work on the drainage over there?
Are you talking about at the emergency access area?
Yeah, near that area.
We've been meeting with Sean and Jack, and we have a proposed drawing into the city that they've been looking at. I don't know if you or Jack have had any feedback on that yet.
Not yet. We've got to sit down with a staff meeting, probably with Mike, EMH&T, our engineer, just to make sure that the submittal that you all did looks good on his end. Then once that gets a thumbs up from our engineering saying, yep, this makes sense, kind of double checks the work. And we'll internally discuss if this is the option we want to proceed with, and then we got to talk about the funding, how that's going to get paid for. So I already know where Kristen's at. She's like, wait a minute, this is a developer. It's not as straight cut forward as that.
I'm
Trust me.
expecting that the developer would pay for any mitigation, as
Except-
opposed, like, why would we be figuring out how to pay for that?
So, great question, because I had the same situation.
Okay.
So where this is at is, we requested a water line be installed. It does benefit everyone in the development. I don't know that it's a price point or anything that's gonna help them sell any more homes, but from a level of redundancy, having two loops of service into that particular subdivision helps the city. So we're looking to connect that with Douglas fire hydrant. So we requested that, the developer was in there doing the work, they went ahead, did that. At some point, we don't know exactly where, the contractor could not have known, probably hit a tile at some point. There's clay tile in old farm fields. Upon evaluation, they're willing to take it down to the elevation that would have allowed it to naturally drain. But to get it further than that, it's not something they caused. So it's kind of hard. We're gonna try to negotiate a compromise between the two parties that allow for us to fix the problem and then them at least maintain and fix some of the provisions that are put in place. It would be easier if we had a topography map to kind of walk you through this. The best they could do from an elevation standpoint is about a foot. We won't go down the 2-foot range, but about a foot in a natural swale on the surface of groundwater to kind of get it where it needs to be. The underground tile is an unknown situation.
Well, that's a risk you take when you buy any property, right?
True, but we're the one that requested the water line.
But as it was a contingent upon
We didn't
building?
put that as a contingent. That was an additional request item that came in later, and they were agreeable to do so.
I walked through that property several times, like years ago, and it was a swamp.
There's always been a level of water that's where the mastodon was found, so it's always been a swamp area.
Like all the way back through there was a swamp.
Yeah, and part of it, so it depends on who you talk to and how long they've been around Johnstown, but part of it was a farm field at one point, and then there was a tile broken that caused it to flood a little bit more, but it just depends on who you talk to and what level of history they have here.
Well, we already have a lot of flooding, like, that comes by the condos, that runs out Caswell. So how is that going to impact that other flooding that happens?
So that's where you pull on a string and you find out how far it goes. So we've actually we're getting into a really, more of a safety and service question, but
Well, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
like, is this gonna cause issues for, like, that's additional,
I would encourage you all to come to a safety and service. I'll give you the recap.
like, I'm just saying, are we gonna cause additional flooding for other people downstream
There's
and cause them
stormwater
additional
management.
problems?
Stormwater management plan has to be submitted with this development.
Well, what I'm hearing is the stormwater management plan hasn't been approved on this property. How can I approve it in zoning if there hasn't been a plan that's been approved by the engineer?
It's part of the
That's part of the engineering that happens afterwards.
final.
No, that's been approved.
This is the final plan.
Engineering's been approved.
That's all been completed.
But if we're now seeing that plan that was submitted is inappropriate or insufficient, how can I approve a final plat?
You're saying it's insufficient.
Insufficient.
Well, there's still water flowing. Walter's got pictures he's gonna show us of water, the drainage. He said he's resubmitted a new plan, right? You've resubmitted a new plan?
I submitted a revised plan to help Sean with the issue that was caused by the water line.
How can I approve this final plat if we still have plans that are not finalized?
We don't know, and it's to take it down a foot, but not to like, what's the target? Like,
I'm gonna try to summarize this, but I can tell you this was a 1.5-hour meeting that we had with the engineers, really outside of any regulatory things that are related to the final plat. I don't mind sharing these things, but we are really getting into a conversation that I would like to have EMH&T here with, Jack here with, if you guys wanna get really down into the nitty-gritties. But from a responsibility standpoint, there's some responsibility from the developer, but there's also responsibility from the city because of the request on our behalf. But then you also have, from a topography situation, there's no way anybody could have known that there was a drain line there.
Right.
So whenever they're doing their engineering for water calculations, they're looking at surface, water, what is created on their particular parcel due to rainwater saturation, those little droplets then go somewhere else. They've accounted for all the droplets on their specific area. You then have a backup situation probably to the north. Knowing that that has happened, what our staff has done is not only have Mike and his team put together a plan, but EMH&T is actually at the last Safety and Service, getting us a proposal for the entirety of that specific area. The last time we had a tremendous amount of flooding was probably about a month and a half ago. All the systems that were in place were inundated. We've had complaints from the farms down the way. And so what we're looking at is how do we come up with a solution that is appropriate for all of it? That's not with just his development. They've accounted for theirs. Actually, their site is probably the most engineered and probably the most proper from the retention pond that they're flowing to. It's all of the other segments that have been put in place along the way. In the old Concord East, they have a retention pond. It's supposed to retain water. The orifice plate has been removed, so it really doesn't retain any water. But then without doing the proper engineering, what's the size plate that needs to go back up on there? Then you go all the way up to Track Street. They have an outlet, we'll call it daylight. Whenever they did the Jersey Street project, they simply daylighted into the swamp area. Probably
What
not
does
my.
daylight mean?
Daylight means you basically take the pipe and you just run it till it sees daylight. So it goes underground and then it just daylights into an area. And it just daylights into kind of the Mastodon area. Not my preferred way of going about it. That's how it was done. Can't go back in time. So what we've got to do is look at that situation. Can we create a retention pond back there so that it will retain the water appropriately, release it at an appropriate rate to prevent the flooding from downstream? The bike path that was constructed across the old retention pond actually serves as a retention basin, but it's not engineered correctly because when it does rain, water flows over top of it. So that's eroding that ability for that to function properly. There's a tremendous amount of issues. Track Street, Pratt Street, all of those have catch
Commerce.
basins, Commerce Boulevard, all of it kind of
Leafy
drains
Dell.
in a way. So with that long summary,
You wanna go ahead?
all of this is actually being put together in a proposal from EMH&T, will be submitted to council. Council will then get a number associated with what it costs to fix associated problems. And then from there, they will more than likely have to partner with grants, federal, state, whatever the case may be, because it's probably not going to be an inexpensive fix. Private property owners, you've got quasi-public infrastructure running underground on private property that doesn't have an easement. So whenever it backs up, it floods their building. We can't fix it because it's on private property. I mean, it's a hot mess. So that's where we're at with it. These are really, really good questions. And so I'm not opposed to doing this. I just don't want to hijack this meeting with it. So if you are inquiring about these things in greater detail, I would encourage you to come to a Safety and Service meeting whenever this final proposal is given from EMH&T, how to correct some of these issues that have been, brewing for the last 40 to 50 years.
It's
ever since the
been
first
years
pipe.
working on trying to get upstream ponds dredged down to the level that they should be dredged down. And I would agree that this project is probably the most engineered with respect to our current stormwater management guidelines that were put in place when another a development was being entertained that did not move forward off of Concord. Yeah, so that was put in place for that, and it was discussed with that, but I think this project is the most engineered with respect to the stormwater management. So the fact that an updated revised plan needed to be submitted, I think, in my opinion, goes to the checks and balances that are a part of that ordinance itself. And I don't think necessarily negate the pre-plat to final plat consideration piece of it, because it's with as minimal changes that happen in the pre-plat to final, it seems more of a formality in that respect. I don't think the stormwater piece would be centralized on this.
Well, the
project.
question, so what's on the, like, making the lots larger is the change. This has already been approved. Making the lots larger doesn't make the problem any worse, is
Right.
what you're saying.
No,
Right.
no.
But
in my mind, our city loses.
I just ask these questions because they're a lot easier to talk about now.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier to make sure that a plan is in place and being followed up on
Yeah.
before we approve something versus after.
It seems like we lose all our leverage if
It's
we
much
approve it,
easier,
in my
you know.
mind.
And
it's
is there
much easier
any
to ask
risk
before than after.
when we put additional houses on that it's gonna create, like you said, it was wet and holding water before the water line was damaged, right? and
None of what
repaired?
they're doing drains in that direction. So this is a problem that's upstream that has zero to do with any of the streets, any of the
But
rooftops.
none of this building will add to that,
No. If they didn't build another
or
lot.
any of the other
Yeah,
downstream.
if they didn't build another lot, that situation is not gonna improve or improve or decrease, in its functionality. It's stuck with the crappy situation that it is, irrelevant. Actually, everything that they have is going into a storm structure. This is water that's upstream. Now, we've argued the case where there's been some level of a dam created from a natural flow of water, but that's only about a foot, and we have more than a foot problem there. There's.
I would argue their building is going to help remediate an issue that's over there, ultimately. Because you're gonna engineer the flow of the water, whereas before,
All right.
Once you get a culvert under the emergency road, because I don't know if you've seen it recently, but there's definitely some washout. There's some
Sure.
from recent storms we had. I can understand where some people have said it's a dam at this point.
Is there a plan for that?
That's what he's saying there is, but that's what I wanted to make sure before we move ahead with this, that there is a plan in place.
Was that part of the previous submitted drainage?
So the
plan?
engineering is really relevant to the stormwater management for their particular impervious surface. So since this doesn't have any bearing on the impervious surface, you can't really tie this to the engineering for that particular site. This is just an additional issue that's kind of came up that we're trying to figure out.
But I heard that there's like water flowing across the new road that's being built, which is part of this.
Correct, so we would never approve the road,
But it's
except.
just a dirt
We'll
road.
call it a road, we'll call it the emergency access. We would never approve that road, and they would never want to install a road that's being washed out. So the city would say, we're not taking this, so I think that's why we're all working together to try to figure out how to best alleviate it. But it's not gonna be, go ahead, Mike.
I would also point out that the plat in front of you is for phase 3. The part of the project that we're talking about with the emergency connection is in phase 4, and that plat was already approved last year. So Mr. Schleybaugh and the engineering team, we're fully committed to continuing to work with the city, even though that plat was approved a year ago. We're not walking away. We're still obligated to pave, and we won't pave because we do know that it's a very weird situation, and in my 19 years of being a civil engineer, I've never seen anything like this. The area immediately north of the site is just incredibly a unique feature. And so we're all trying to work together to get that part of the site rectified through our construction plan. This plat, though, sits on the other side of those homes.
That's the point well taken, okay.
No.
I was a little bit, I have to admit, I was confused if that
I
access
think
road
where
was
you
part
got
of
us
the
all, or like
previous-
our ears perked up, and you said it's like been submitted, and we're like, wait, what? It's not done?
We requested them, and quite honestly, we could have submitted it, and we could have had our engineers do the work at our dime, but we got with the developers, since they'd already had a lot of engineering done on the site, and said, would you be willing to collaborate and have your team do the work, since they've already got all the calculations and engineering, rather than us reinvent the wheel. Our guys go out, do all the resurveying and everything else. We leaned on them. So from a submittal standpoint, it's actually, in a way, they're doing some of our engineers' work. They submitted it to us per our request, so.
Do we have any other questions from the commissioners for the applicant or the city manager?
the only question I had, and I don't have the other version to look at, but Reserve B on here, looking at note F, that being set aside for HOA ownership as open space, that's the same as it was in the original plat, right?
Yes.
Okay. HOA, I assume all the conversations have it upstream at that point with the HOA that they are fine taking that ownership on with that piece, so.
Yes.
All right, that's all I had.
All right, thank you. Do we have any comments from the public? Any comments from the public?
Walter Robb, and I was on zoning at the time for the previous approval and things. So, yeah, that emergency road would have been part of that phase 4. So I like that it's going to be addressed, and I don't see the need to hold up phase 3 because it is downstream of all that has already been discussed. So, yeah, I would like to see it addressed in a timely manner. It's just unfortunate it happened when the development was going on. Thank you.
The only other thing that I have, so in the letter here, the additional phases to Concord Crossing East from February 28th, 23. I just want to make sure, I wish we had legal here because I'd ask a couple questions, but I want to make sure that that's a regular process and where I understand where we require the applicant in terms of building things, doing design, things like that. The HOA was the one thing that I had questions about on this of whether that was a fairly normal process, and I want to make sure that we don't prejudice any of the rights of the HOA in here with what we have them agreeing to, because I know that'll be a conversation completely
What's your
uninvolved with the
question
city.
now?
So I'm making sure we're not getting in the way of the HOA because they will have to work with the applicant on their own.
I think that's a private agreement. I don't
Right.
think that has anything to do with it.
Well, that's what I'm wondering, how far we went in obligating them to join with the HOA, things like that. I don't want to prejudice the rights of the HOA.
I don't think we obligated anything, if I remember correctly from the previous conversations. There's a,
Is that a question for the applicant?
That was more for the city.
Oh,
there were conversations with respect to the ownership with Joe Simonello and the HOA majority.
That was a
and
different
what that meant.
relationship when that was being discussed
Yeah.
than I think what we have now. So I'm
But I
less
don't think
worried
the
about it
city,
now, but,
I don't think the city is in the middle of anything with.
right, we
respect to
should,
HOA.
I just want to make sure we're not.
No.
all right. Hearing no other public comment, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Before we make a motion, I just want to confirm with you, Sean, that in my mind, that you don't think that the city would be in a more favorable negotiating position to defer this vote while we negotiate the drainage plan. I'll defer to your expertise, but it seems to me contrary to conventional wisdom that we approve and then negotiate, and instead of negotiate, then approve.
I would, just my unprofessional legal opinion, from what I view and see, I think you would be hard pressed legally to withhold a final plat based on engineering that's been approved and a final plat that has no bearing on the drainage issue with the problems that are existing. So if you were to say, we're not gonna give you this without that, they're gonna say, how is this tied to that legally? I think you're gonna walk into a bad situation because now you're
Well, really, they could move forward with the smaller lots that they already had approved, right? Or no?
They would still have to get a final approval submittal.
Oh.
So they would have to come back, but like I said, you're using one as leverage, although legally, I don't know that you can use that leverage. It would be, for you to deny this, you would have to have reasonable grounds to deny this based on information as it relates to this particular subdivision final plat. Without legal grounds that
We don't-
says,
really necessary.
this is something that's causing this
Formality.
situation over here, I think you're gonna lose in court every day of the week.
There's no criteria.
That's just my unschooled legal opinion, and Mike is shaking his head. I'll defer to Mike. What is your thoughts? You've been through this more than I have. And you're the applicant, so.
Respectfully, I agree. I mean, it's a final plat. If it's a step farther from the preliminary plat, it's not an engineering item. I agree with you, Sean. And again, I think too, we still have phases 5 and 6 to come with this project as well.
So you're still not out of our grasp yet.
Mr. Schleiball is not walking away from Johnstown or his commitment to.
Fair enough. Okay. That's why I just wanted to
The
confirm
fact
that.
that these are broken up into phases and that the issue being talked about is in a phase completely separate from this, I don't think
Yeah, I
there's
think
any
it's,
standing.
I agree. I'm there too. I want to see if we have a code on the specific to their criteria that we're supposed to consider on a plat, on a final plat approval. Does anyone have that up? If we could just read that real quick, just so we all know the criteria that we're supposed to be using to base our vote on here.
I will find it. Final plat, 1107. Hey, why don't we do this? Submission procedure, content, the owner shall submit a final plat of subdivision on trace cloth. I think we're past tracing cloth, hopefully. Okay with that. No, these are just specifications for the submittals. If the plat is approved by council ownership.
The biggest thing between the preliminary and the final is all the engineering that happens in the meantime. All the other stormwater piece that we talked about that happens after council approval, because this, again, is a recommendation that goes to council for final as well. It doesn't end here. And so the difference between the preliminary and the final is all the detail work that goes in to look at, you know, making sure and vetting out that the engineering matches the plan.
Yeah, the additional requirement information, the final plat shall contain the following additional information: boundary of plat based on accurate reverse angles, linear dimensions, true angles, distances to the nearest street intersection, accurate description of the plat. Really, it goes to what that's gonna be submitted to the county. The county is then going to record it, and then those plats will be submitted. Municipal township, basically all of this has to do with surveying, radii, internal angles.
All right, you're good. If it's just engineering stuff, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Jesse Koppel,
Yes.
Ben Lee,
Yes.
Kristen Hurst,
Yes.
Brian Green.
Yes.
We'd like to beat you up a little bit. Thank you for your patience.
I'm gonna have to figure out how much I beat him up, because I beat him up pretty hard. And he's gonna come here, Mike will tell you that I usually angle pretty heavily to get as much as I can through that.
Appreciate all your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. Do we have any other business not on the agenda that any board members would like to bring up tonight?
Just following up again on Leafy Dell Apartments. Any headway from that, from our discussion in council?
From a violation, Terry just sent me today what he sees as the violations. I haven't had a chance to even open that email yet, but I just think from general conversations that we had is there is high grass, which is gonna have to be identified. We're getting all this compiled, gonna send a letter over to Coughlin. We talked about this in the design review. How do we go about rectifying zoning issues? First, take the information, take the ordinance, show them where they're in violation in the ordinance. Send a letter, no action is done, then we follow up with a certified letter. After the certified letter, some actions we can do on ourselves if it creates a, I want to say a health hazard, then we can immediately act upon it. If it's just an aesthetic situation, we can't physically go on the property. So for lawn care, things like that, we can send our crew out, because it can lead to infestations and things. But other items,
Do you know, is there a reason why they're not keeping it up?
There's no way you can mow it. Trust me, I was next to it today mowing.
It's too wet?
You wouldn't be able to even get a brush hog through there because the ground is so uneven. You would be hitting dirt mounds, flinging rocks everywhere. You'd have to go in with 5 guys and weed eaters to be able to do it. It's pretty bad.
so then Jack and Terry are working on this together. So now from mounds of things, as long as it's mowed, can't necessarily go after the aesthetics of it, as long as the stormwater management and the erosion controls have been met. So all of those pieces will be looked at, they'll be given notification, and then they'll have time to correctively get them fixed. So I'm waiting on, Jack may already have his done as well. I know he was on vacation today.
Do we know why they're not upkeeping it?
It could just be that there's miscommunication. I'm just speculating.
Yeah.
I have no
I
idea.
didn't know if like anybody talked to them or.
Yeah, there's no real reason. They did a lot in the early winter months and then just kind of abandoned ship since then. None of the equipment's really moved. It's kind of odd. The only other thing that I had was any language on demolitions. Do we have anything coming on that?
Not yet. Just a variety of tasks trying to get to, so.
The first one went pretty smoothly. They didn't waste any time on that.
Some remediation items. I went down today and looked at it, so they're gonna have to come back and fix some things. So, other than that,
Oh, I'm glad you're keeping up with it. All right. Hearing no others, I will motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourning.
Get you guys home early for dinner tonight.